Welcome back to part 2 of our budget debate. Several questions do emerge. One of our questions which emerges is, if Chidambaram reduces expenditure to control fiscal deficit, will he be able to balance the plateauing growth? However, there is another question, Bibek Debroy, which I'd like to begin by asking you. We've been hearing this, that all critical ministries, right, Navika, will have their budgets cut. We heard this about defense, we heard about rural development. I think Jairam Ramesh has been cribbing openly about it. He wrote a letter. Even the atomic energy department, we are hearing it's going to be cut.
Not only that, the biggest problem is infrastructure sector, the Ministry of Roads and Highways. If budgets are cut in highways, in railways, do you think this is going to be counterproductive in the budget, which is looking at, spurring growth at the same time as looking at keeping a cap on expenditure, big-scale expenditure?
Well, before I respond to that, can I quickly make a few points about what was being talked about earlier about taxing the rich? On taxing the rich, firstly, there's a little bit that's symbolic in nature. And I'm certain one is going to have things like an inheritance tax. I don't think he'd actually want to increase the rates. He will probably have something like a surcharge, but the point about a surcharge is that a surcharge, unlike a rate hike, does not bring in that much of extra revenue. What he may, however, do, and I'm certain he's going to do that because it has major revenue implications, is to increase the excise duty rate for certain items that are perceived to be items of elitist consumption. Coming back to the question that was asked, and this is really the key, that the way he is going to manage the numbers and have those Sops and increase non-plan expenditure and stick to the deficit numbers is by slashing plan expenditure dramatically. And by slashing plan expenditure, he will be able to save at least 50,000 crores, which will be used for these Sops. Is it desirable? Of course it's not desirable, but that's the only way he can honestly stick to that fiscal deficit target of 4.8%.
Is that good for the country? Meghnad Desai, they know that you're cutting your defense budget, you're going to delay your acquisitions of howitzer guns, anti-tank missiles, you're going to cut down on the rural employment ministry. Is that desirable for a country at this stage of growth? Let's look at the bigger story.
But, I think we should stop thinking that all government expenditure is a good thing or that it is a growth-enhancing thing, because what we ought to measure are outcomes and not inputs. So I think there is no proof that the government of India spends money efficiently and that it enhances growth. Growth is not coming from the government expenditure. Growth comes from private investment. And what the government has done, it has wrecked household savings, it has wrecked private investment, and in about time, it's really cut.
No, but Meghnad Desai, I'd like to
make room for growth enhancing.
No, but for example, Swami, we are hearing that there was a target of 9,000 kilometers of roads in this fiscal. And the figures that we have is because of so many constraints, only 1,000 kilometers, I think, have actually been awarded contracts for. I don't know whether the National Highway Authority is plain inefficient or whether it's because of budgetary constraints, but I absolutely do know, Swami, that one of the reasons is budgetary constraints. Now, that's not bad expenditure. Meghnad Desai, no, you don't think
NHAI.
So? Okay. Okay,
no,
go ahead.
No, not NHAI. NHAI has not had money. No, it's not a situation of NHAI not having money because of budgetary constraints. Not at all. Not at all.
Exactly.
Well, we have been... Watch. Hasn't the ministry been told to look out for funds, from the National Highway Authority, partly funded by market borrowing? Isn't there a budget constraint that we're constantly told that there are budget constraints? Officials there tell us that there are budget constraints and these will only get worse.
Let me explain how NHAI is funded.
As an example.
Let me explain how NHAI is funded.
As an example. I don't want to get into NHAI.
It's important. It's important.
Yeah, let's be okay.
Because you talked of highways. Highways, if they are funded through NHAI, is usually done as what is called a PPP scheme, where there's a private-public partnership. A stretch of highway is bid out to the best bidder, and that person pays a price and over time gets an annuity from NHAI. They don't get it one shot. The basic reason why the number of highways has fallen, the number of bids had fallen, it's picked up again a little bit, was for 4 years NHAI did not have a chairman. And no files could be signed, as you know, and for the first UPA government, no files.
Okay, no, but let's not get
Not the reason.
Even if
the reason for highways.
Okay, so you see, that may not be the only reason. Some people, officials say it's one of the reasons. My larger point, 1 minute, gentlemen. Larger point is, it's not only roads. It's going to be the Atomic Energy Department. It's going to be defense. It's going to be Rural Development Ministry. So will there be a cascading effect? There will not be a cascading effect, Swami. It will not have overall impact.
Arnab, if I may come in, I will argue strongly that while no doubt some squeeze is being put on planned spending in this fiscal year, I will bet anything that in the coming fiscal year, Chidambaram is going to show a significant increase in spending. It is not going to be an austerity budget where everything is slashed. The main thrust is going to be, look, this year we only had 5% GDP growth, so I didn't have revenue, I didn't have the money to spend. Next year I'm going to have 6.5% GDP growth.
Yeah.
That is going to give me much more
So they're
revenue,
looking to last.
and that will then allow me to spend much more.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to bet that the budget is not going to be an austerity budget.
Yeah.
The budget is going to be one which shows, because of all the good things I'm doing outside the budget, including the railway, increase in railway fares, deregulation of oil, FDI in retail, enthusing foreign investment, Indian investment, I'm going to get growth. That growth is going to give me more than enough revenue, both to bring down my fiscal deficit to 4.8% of GDP and to have an increase in a number of planned spending schemes and some populist schemes.
So is next year
Believe me, it can be done. I mean, just the decontrol of oil. If your under recoveries fall from 180,000 crores, next year you only have to provide 40,000 crores for under recoveries. More than 100,000 crores you are getting a saving simply on the oil deregulation.
Got it.
So, oil deregulation plus growth gives you lots of money to have the best of both worlds. You can both have a fall in the budget deficit to 4.8% of GDP and a rise in planned spending and some money for some of the goodies like the Food Securities Act.
So,
Vivek Debroy, the real question is also about the budget having something for investments. We've seen the growth, and growth investments, that's the area that Chidambaram has to look at, also because we have a 10 million workforce which is added every year to the population. So investment issues are issues that Chidambaram will need to address along with the expenditure as well as the growth issues.
Yes, but I don't think the budget is going to solve that. The reason investments have flagged is partly the deficit, but more importantly, in my view, it is problems connected with land acquisition, problems connected with forest clearances, problems connected with environment clearances, a complete collapse of decision making at the executive level, not legislative, and this is both at the ministerial level and at the bureaucratic level. The budget cannot solve this. Of course, it needs to be solved. And which is why I have a little bit of disagreement with Swami, because if I want to be honest with the deficit numbers and I want to do everything that Swami wants me to do, I need a nominal GDP growth rate of 14.5%. I see absolutely no reason why growth rates will pick up and why I will get that 14.5% nominal GDP growth rate. If I nevertheless continue to estimate and project a 14.5% nominal GDP growth rate, lo and behold, when the revised estimates come along, I will discover that I have grossly underestimated the fiscal deficit.
Swami, the real question also at this point is the entire issue of subsidies. Yes, there has been an increase in the railway fares. There has been this deregulation of diesel and petrol prices. You're saying all of that will release money. But we do know that between 2008 and 2012, 4 years in a row, the subsidy to GDP percentage has been over 2% of GDP. And that's never happened more than 2 years in the last 4 decades before that. So how do you see Chidambaram addressing that issue of subsidy, or do you think it's automatically resolved with the railway fare hike and the diesel and oil decontrol that he's already affected?
Now we got two things happened. On the one hand, the international price, after having crashed in 2008, it went all the way down to 35 or 36. It steadily clawed its way up to $115 or so, which is the rate today. The second thing that happened was that the rupee, having at one time seemingly settled at 45 rupees to the dollar, went to 55 rupees to the dollar because of the apparent mismanagement of the economy. Both of those constituted a double whammy which sent up the rupee value of all oil imports. Chidambaram's aim is to tackle both those in one go. He cannot bring down the international price, but there is every sign that the international price is now leveling off, and in fact in the last few days it has recently fallen. But he is very clear that he does not want the rupee to depreciate further, that every 1 rupee depreciation of the rupee against the dollar means that much more of his oil subsidy. If against about 55 rupees he can bring down the exchange rate to about 52 or 53, that itself will wipe out 20,000-30,000 from the subsidy. So I said, Navika, you're quite right in saying between 2008 and 2012, because of rupee depreciation and rise in oil prices, all the budget estimates kept going haywire. But now with two things, one is deregulation, second, stopping the depreciation of the rupee, those two acts together can finally bring the oil subsidy back to sanity, bring it down to no more than 30,000-40,000 crores.
Sorry, Navika, I want to come in on this. I do have one serious concern on the subsidy bill, and that's the fertilizer subsidy. I do believe, I agree with Swami, that I think the subsidy on petroleum and petroleum products, keeping aside kerosene, is going to come down, largely because crude oil prices have remained flat and it's tending to fall. But I do have a problem with with fertilizer subsidies, particularly imported urea. Because even if naphtha prices fall, it is very difficult in the political economy of the budget that you talked about in the beginning to increase farm gate prices of fertilizer. And you can't play the game from the beginning of the year of not giving the fertilizer ministry the checks to pay the companies that supply fertilizers, which is what is always done, by the way. The last 3 months of the year, fertilizer companies never get their money. So I am concerned about the fertilizer subsidy. If naphtha prices ease up considerably, Chidambaram will get a bonus. Otherwise, that one will bite.
Well, I just want to, listening to everyone, I get a sense that we're not thinking politically, I'm afraid. The number crunching may look all very good, but you ask any Congress politician, this is a pre-election year, and they are not going to wait for next year's budget. Some of our panelists are saying, we'll have this kind of budget this year, we'll prepare for another kind next year. I don't know whether the Congress party is taking such a long-term view. I'll take another short break. When I come back, we'll talk about that. What do the voting classes get? Back in a couple of minutes.